A restless hush falls over the neighborhood as law enforcement vehicles roll to a stop outside a seemingly ordinary home. Moments earlier, that very home appeared to be part of the tranquil scenery, just another place where families wind down after a long day. Now, flashing lights reflect off the windows, exposing the tension buried behind each drawn curtain. Officers gather on the lawn with a shared, unspoken apprehension. Something far more sinister lurks within these walls than anyone dared suspect. As an unmarked door creaks open, the grim truth begins to reveal itself. A hidden room filled with items that speak of obsession and cruelty. Each footstep down the stairs echoes a growing certainty that this hidden space has been a sanctuary for evil. Boxes, files, and personal artifacts sit in eerie stillness, hinting at a long history of carefully concealed secrets. The moment that door swings wide, the suspenseful calm shatters. What was once a quiet suburban address becomes the epicenter of an unsettling revelation, forcing everyone, neighbors and investigators alike, to confront the unsettling reality that a ruthless killer has been living right next door. Welcome to True Crime Acts, where we shed light on unsettling mysteries and break down the shocking realities behind each case. If you're drawn to stories that test the limits of human nature, make sure to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you never miss a moment of our ongoing investigations. Together, we'll explore the darkest corners of crime and ask the questions that unlock each hidden chapter. Gilgo Beach was once simply a scenic destination. Families came here to swim, fish, and enjoy the coastal atmosphere. Locals prided themselves on a relatively calm existence, far from the bustle of nearby New York City. But in the early 2010s, a discovery shattered this idyllic image. A body, found partially hidden in the beach grass, sparked fear and confusion within the community. Authorities initially treated the incident as a tragic, isolated event. Soon, however, more remains came to light, each connected by proximity to this unassuming stretch of sand. As law enforcement searched for answers, they began to suspect that this stretch of coastline was being used as a dumping ground for victims. Some had been missing for months, others for years. A pattern emerged. Many of the victims had struggled financially or had been involved in sex work, making them vulnerable and less likely to be noticed when they vanished. Yet the fear rippling through Gilgo Beach was felt by everyone, not just those on society's margins. Local media seized the story, quickly coining terms like the Long Island serial killer. Residents saw their peaceful community thrust into the national spotlight. The dunes and tidal inlets that once symbolized relaxation now evoked unease. Parents grew wary of letting children wander too far. Joggers stuck to crowded paths, uneasy about the possibility that a predator moved unseen among them. Even in the face of mounting alarm, concrete leads proved elusive. The public followed every scrap of news, hoping for a break in the case. Behind the scenes, a collection of law enforcement agencies, local police, state investigators, and even FBI specialists quietly merged their resources. They analyzed cell phone records, reopened cold case files, and tried to pin down any suspect who could be linked to the bodies. Would their growing suspicion converge on an individual who had been methodically operating under the radar? Or would the killer continue exploiting Gilgo Beach's isolation, evading justice indefinitely? Not long after the first major sweep of Gilgo Beach, investigators realized the scope of the problem. The victims were not all discovered in the same condition or location, yet patterns of disposal linked them. A suspect emerged here and there, perhaps a local fisherman with a sketchy history, or a truck driver passing through frequently. Each time, the lead seemed promising, sparking hope among the families awaiting answers. But these leads often fizzled under scrutiny, leaving the investigation at a frustrating standstill. With progress stalled, the media speculated aggressively. Reports hinted that law enforcement possessed far more evidence than they were sharing. Rumors spread about suspicious vehicles creeping along Ocean Parkway late at night. A handful of locals claimed to have seen bizarre lights on the dunes, though these were easily dismissed as passing headlights. In the absence of a clear suspect, the public imagination ran wild. It wasn't just the police feeling the frustration. Families of missing individuals demanded faster answers. Some believed investigators were ignoring key facts or focusing too narrowly on certain suspect profiles. Tension hung in the air whenever new remains turned up. There was an unspoken dread, how many more might be hidden in the tall grasses or shallow marshes? Forensic experts studied fiber evidence, phone records, and bits of personal belongings found near the bodies. The puzzle pieces were scattered across multiple counties, each requiring careful verification and analysis. This meticulous work took time, further fueling public unease. Journalists roamed the area, interviewing anyone who might shed light on the events. Many longtime residents had never locked their doors before this. Now they checked every bolt and scanned every passing vehicle. As the months stretched into years, one haunting question hovered over Gilgo Beach. Was there one killer or multiple killers using this lonely coastline as a common dumping ground? And if it was indeed a single murderer, how had he managed to stay so many steps ahead of the collective force of local, state, and federal authorities? Amid the mounting tension, a name quietly slipped into investigators' peripheral vision: Rex Heuermann. At first glance, he seemed like any other suburban homeowner, maintaining a steady job and going about daily routines without fanfare. Neighbors occasionally glimpsed him loading supplies into a car or leafing through newspapers in his driveway. He was polite enough, but notably reserved. The initial spark of interest came from a digital clue. Heuermann's online search patterns showed a curiosity about the Gilgo Beach homicides. In itself, that might not be incriminating. Thousands followed the case. But deeper research hinted he tracked investigative updates meticulously. Furthermore, at least one person recalled crossing paths with Heuermann near the beach at odd times, though the sighting was dismissed as a coincidence. The more the task force watched his movements, the more Heuermann's quiet life looked less random and more orchestrated. The idea that a seemingly ordinary individual could orchestrate multiple murders on Gilgo Beach left investigators unsettled. The possibility of a suburban serial killer felt at odds with the usual stereotypes. Heuermann had no outward record of violence. He had no active warrants. Yet investigators found themselves returning to his name again and again. Neighbors interviewed by law enforcement described him as unremarkable but guarded. He seldom attended block parties or joined community meetings, preferring to keep interactions minimal. One man recalled exchanging a few words with Heuermann about home maintenance, remarking only that he seemed perfectly normal. Another neighbor found it odd that Heuermann rarely put garbage out on the curb, though no one could say if that was unusual or just a quirk. Even so, a profile of potential involvement took shape. Someone who might feel safer in a mundane routine, confident he could camouflage monstrous acts behind a facade of normalcy. Investigators made a calculated decision: keep Heuermann under watch, wait for an opening, and see if he'd slip up. Their intuition told them that if he truly had a hand in the disappearances, time might reveal the cracks in his carefully maintained life. Would their quiet scrutiny yield a breakthrough? Or would Rex Heuermann manage to keep his secrets locked away, just out of their reach? As surveillance on Rex Heuermann escalated, investigators noticed peculiar patterns. Late nights spent in a garage workshop, curtains drawn tightly when he was home, and meticulous disposal of trash. Never enough to raise direct alarm, but odd in combination. A covert tip hinted that Heuermann might be storing items related to the disappearances. The question was how to confirm it without alerting him. Unknown to most, Heuermann had been quietly amassing various materials, some personal effects that might once have belonged to the victims. This so-called secret collection was rumored to be kept in a hidden room or locked storage area, far from everyday visitors. Detectives found it particularly suspicious that he often followed Gilgo Beach updates in real time, as though he was double-checking how close authorities were to the truth. With each news bulletin, investigators suspected he analyzed whether to move or destroy his hidden possessions. Neighbors sometimes heard unusual sounds from the house at odd hours: hammering, the metallic scrape of dragging heavy objects, and even moments that suggested furniture being moved. These were fleeting observations, easily dismissed as renovations. Yet, as the puzzle came into sharper focus, law enforcement wondered if these noises indicated he was modifying or fortifying a secret space. All the while, Heuermann worked diligently to project a normal persona. He left for work each morning, gave polite nods to anyone he passed, and returned home with an unchanging routine. He meticulously read every major article on the Gilgo Beach investigation, possibly adjusting his habits based on new developments. Investigators hypothesized that he was both proud of his cunning and fearful of a small oversight that might expose him. Would law enforcement gather enough evidence to obtain a warrant and finally reveal the contents of that locked space? Or could a single misstep tip off Heuermann, allowing him to erase every trace of his hidden collection before the authorities could intervene? Everything changed on a crisp morning when a significant lead emerged. A forensic analysis connected items found near one of the victim's remains to materials purchased under Rex Heuermann's name. A partial fingerprint recovered from a piece of evidence matched one in a minor database entry linked to Heuermann years ago, though it was overlooked until new technology flagged the data. The break was enough to seek a more comprehensive search warrant for his home. Operation planning commenced with urgency. Officers assembled quietly in the pre-dawn hush, conscious that if Heuermann sensed any movement, he might scramble to destroy or relocate vital clues. The tension was palpable as the lead detective explained the steps. Approach the residence calmly, contain Heuermann without giving him time to act, and secure every room, especially any locked or boarded up areas. A single slip could compromise the entire mission. Even with the new evidence, a flutter of doubt remained. What if they found nothing tying Heuermann to the crimes? Yet the detective leading the raid was certain enough to push forward. All the puzzle pieces, strange purchasing habits, suspicious nighttime activities, consistent digital footprints and stories about Gilgo Beach, pointed to Heuermann as the hidden anchor in this grim saga. Heuermann's face reportedly went pale when he opened the door to find multiple armed investigators. He attempted a casual demeanor, asking if something was wrong. The lead detective produced the warrant, voice steady, instructing him to step aside. Meanwhile, other officers fanned out, determined to locate any sealed-off spaces. The entire operation hinged on discovering that elusive trophy room, rumored to hold incriminating items. Would the final puzzle piece snap into place with the opening of a single hidden door? Or had Heuermann already anticipated this move and cleared out the evidence? The team spread throughout the house, scanning every closet and crawl space. They combed through boxes in the garage, turned over rugs, and checked behind appliances. For a while, they found nothing extraordinary, just standard tools, personal belongings, and documents indicating day-to-day living. Then someone noticed an inconsistency in the floor plan. A blank wall that didn't align with the rest of the house's layout. Pressing on this supposed wall, an officer felt it give slightly. Another found a hidden latch, and the panel swung open, revealing a narrow passage. At the end stood a locked door. The sense of anticipation mounted as flashlights pointed at the heavily secured entrance. Heuermann, now detained nearby, watched with a grim expression, as though he understood the significance of that door. Inside, the air felt heavy and still, as if this space hadn't been disturbed for some time. The single overhead bulb cast harsh shadows on rows of shelving. Each shelf bore labeled containers, some sealed, others partly open. An officer gingerly raised the lid of a small crate and froze. Within lay items that linked directly to victims from Gilgo Beach. Jewelry, clothing fragments, small personal effects. A hush fell as the full weight of the discovery settled. It was a trove of memories from lives cut short, assembled in a manner that suggested both pride and careful organization. As investigators cataloged the contents, more shocking revelations emerged. Photographs of unknown individuals, receipts from coastal areas, even short notes scrawled in handwriting that matched Heuermann's. The room stood as a devastating testament to the cruelty behind the Gilgo Beach crimes. Everyone present understood that these artifacts would transform the investigation into a direct confrontation with Heuermann's darkest secrets. Was this hidden chamber the final proof needed to connect all the missing threads? Or would Heuermann find a way to challenge the link between these haunting objects and the bodies discovered along that lonely shoreline? The moment the sealed room was found, the search team radioed confirmation to arrest Heuermann on suspicion of homicide. A wave of hushed excitement rippled among the investigators. Finally, they had something tangible. They emerged from the house with boxes of evidence, each one meticulously catalogued. In the street, news vans began to arrive, cameras eager to capture the face of the man now prime suspect in the Gilgo Beach murders. Back at the station, Heuermann maintained a stoic front. He He initially insisted he had no knowledge of the items found in his secret space. "I collect antiques," he said vaguely. "Maybe some of those are just oddities I picked up." Detectives, however, possessed an overwhelming set of incriminating details. Fingerprint matches, personal items clearly identified by surviving relatives of victims, and digital logs showing how closely he followed the Gilgo Beach investigation over the years. The public reaction was a mixture of relief, astonishment, and anger. Families who had spent countless nights searching for loved ones demanded quick justice. Citizens poured onto social media, inundating comment sections with questions about how Heuermann could have gone unnoticed for so long. Others worried that there might be additional victims still undiscovered along the beaches. Even with the prime suspect in custody, the sense of closure felt incomplete. Local law enforcement spoke cautiously, affirming the necessity of a thorough investigation before any formal declaration of guilt. The evidence, while extensive, needed careful organization to withstand a high-profile trial. District attorneys worked closely with detectives to build a bulletproof case. The trophy room alone could seal Heuermann's fate if the chain of custody and forensic links held up in court. Would the weight of this evidence finally deliver long overdue justice for the Gilgo Beach victims? Or was there a risk Heuermann might exploit legal loopholes to escape the punishment he seemed destined to face? Within days of Rex Heuermann's arrest, forensic experts ramped up their analysis of everything seized from the hidden room. Each piece had to be matched definitively to a victim, creating a solid link between Heuermann and the Gilgo Beach bodies. Articles of clothing were scrutinized for hairs or bodily fluids. Tiny fragments of sand were collected from shoes, which specialists aimed to match with specific areas of the Long Island coastline. Even the containers themselves were examined for fingerprints, shipping labels, or any trace materials that might establish a chain of custody. Law enforcement faced the massive task of organizing this data into a coherent narrative, one that could be presented to a jury without confusion. They labeled each artifact, cross-referenced it to the timeline of disappearances, and reviewed every digital footprint: phone calls, text messages, online activity, and location tracking. The scope was enormous, yet the overarching story of how Heuermann allegedly lured or abducted his victims emerged with chilling clarity. The community followed each development with morbid fascination. Local news outlets ran nightly segments on the case. Families of victims attended public briefings, sometimes horrified, but also hopeful, that each new piece of evidence would bring them a step closer to justice. Meanwhile, Heuermann's defense attorney attempted to paint him as a misunderstood enthusiast of odd collectibles, insisting that circumstantial evidence could be misleading. Amid the swirling media frenzy, investigators remained focused. They needed definitive proof to ensure that none of the evidence could be dismissed as coincidence. Every fiber, fingerprint, and digital footprint was a potential building block in a case that stood to be one of Long Island's most notorious criminal trials. Would these carefully assembled facts expose Heuermann's alleged guilt beyond a shadow of a doubt? Or could his defense succeed in dismantling the carefully woven connections between his secret hoard and the Gilgo Beach remains? The day the trial began, a swarm of journalists, true crime enthusiasts, and bystanders gathered outside the courthouse. Some brandished signs with photos of the victims demanding justice. Others held banners calling for a fair trial, a testament to the complexity and divisive nature of the case. Tensions ran high, as it felt like the entire Long Island community had come to witness the final act of a horror story that had haunted them for years. Inside, the prosecution presented a meticulously crafted sequence of evidence. Digital records tying Heuermann's online activity to the times victims disappeared, testimonies from forensic experts linking items in his trophy room to specific individuals, and personal accounts from those who narrowly escaped suspicious encounters. Each statement painted a picture of a man who, behind a mask of normalcy, was capable of cold calculation and cruelty. Heuermann sat at the defense table, neatly dressed, face impassive. His lawyer argued that the evidence was circumstantial, that none of the items proved he'd committed murder. He pressed investigators on every procedure, challenging the chain of custody for each piece of evidence. The cross-examination was grueling, Families of victims sometimes left the room in tears when confronted with graphic descriptions or autopsy results. Media coverage soared, with nightly recaps dissecting the day's testimony. Commentators debated whether Heuermann's calm demeanor was a sign of innocence or the mark of a manipulative personality. Meanwhile, the jury watched every detail, from a single stray hair found on a victim's clothing to logs of suspicious phone calls that placed Heuermann near Gilgo Beach at critical times. Could the mountains of evidence overcome any defense strategy? Everyone waited for the final outcome, aware that the verdict would either grant closure to a tormented community or spark outrage if the suspect walked free. The question lingered. Was this the moment justice would finally shine a light on Gilgo Beach's darkest secrets? The verdict came after days of deliberation. Jurors weighed the physical evidence against the arguments of the defense. When the foreperson announced a finding of guilty, a wave of relief and raw emotion flooded the courtroom. Family members wept, some clasping hands and trembling with the knowledge that the person responsible for their loved ones' disappearances might finally be held accountable. Media outlets broadcast live updates, capturing the moment the Gilgo Beach community had long awaited. Outside, news cameras captured the mixed feelings of triumph and sorrow. While the outcome brought a measure of closure, it could never erase the pain endured by the victims' families. In the weeks and months following the trial, law enforcement continued to revisit cold cases, wondering if Heuermann might be linked to other unresolved disappearances across Long Island or even beyond. The trove of materials in his secret room suggested he had documented more encounters than initially revealed. The Gilgo Beach shoreline eventually saw visitors return in search of its natural beauty. Yet the memory of the crimes lingered like a storm cloud on the horizon. Local officials increased patrols and installed better surveillance along Ocean Parkway. Civic groups advocated for missing person resources, hoping to prevent similar tragedies. People who once took pride in their quiet community adapted to a new vigilance, reminded that evil can grow beneath the mundane facade of everyday life. Over time, documentaries, books, and podcasts dissected every angle of the Gilgo Beach murders. The case became a grim chapter in American true crime history, a testament to the unpredictable nature of predators who blend into suburbia. And in the end, the biggest lesson was that one single discovery, a hidden trophy room, had cracked open a flood of revelations, showing how a sense of normalcy can hide unimaginable horrors. The final question for Gilgo Beach and beyond: can heightened awareness and better communication within communities prevent another predator from operating unseen? Or will new threats find ways to thrive in the quiet corners where no one dares to look too closely? This community's resilience, tested by one of the most disturbing series of crimes in its history, proves that unity and vigilance can unearth truths once buried in darkness. By shedding light on these devastating events, we honor the victims, support their loved ones, and reaffirm our collective responsibility to stay watchful in our own neighborhoods. If you believe in the power of awareness and the importance of unraveling hidden dangers, subscribe to True Crime Acts for more investigations that expose the shadows lurking in everyday life. Like this video and turn on notifications to stay informed about upcoming stories. Together we strengthen each other's resolve to question the unfamiliar and speak out against evil. Let us stand as a reminder that whenever a community comes together, no secret can remain hidden forever.